We were learning about Tveria, and we're on Daf Vav Amud Aleph, and I mentioned that I mean the Gemara mentioned, I should say, that Tveria was unique. Rekes is Tveria. The Gemara said that Rekes is Tveria. That was the final conclusion, and the reason why it's called Rekes is because even the empty ones are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. But the question is, aren't all Jewish people considered like a pomegranate, filled like mitzvahs with like a pomegranate? We have other Gemaras that talk about the entire Jewish people that way. So this seems to be a question on our Gemara that says only Tveria people are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So the commentaries struggle to try to explain what the difference is. In other words, when do we say that all the Jewish people are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate? When do we say that the people of Tveria, specifically, they are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate? And one of the ways of answering it is in the time of Yehoshua, it was the people of Tveria. In the time of Shlomo HaMelech, when he said Kapelach Harimain Rakoi Seich, when he said the other pasuk that he's talking about the entire Jewish people, because in his day the entire Jewish people was filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So that's one of the ways of explaining it. Another is that had to do with, is it the majority of the people or is it everyone? That in Tveria, everyone was filled with mitzvahs. In the other places, it was maybe majority. There were certain areas that maybe neighborhoods maybe that had less, that didn't have it. In general, the Jewish people are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. But the question really then leads us to the next part, and that is, what was so unique about Rekes or Tveria that caused the people to be filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate? What did they do in Tveria that made them more involved in mitzvahs? What was affecting them? What influenced them to be so filled with mitzvahs? What happened in Tveria that was different than everywhere else? And any thoughts? Anyone have any thoughts why Tveria people would be filled with more mitzvahs? So we learned it, and I think we quoted it sometime back, that there's a Gemara that mentions that Tveria, being in a valley, they would accept Shabbos early. The reason they accepted Shabbos early was because they thought that it was dark already. Now, in truth, it wasn't really dark yet, because they're just there in the valley, so they don't see the sun when it really sets. They have a limited vision of the sun in the horizon, because they're lower down. They don't actually see when the sun is actually going below the horizon. So because they would accept Shabbos early, means they were more careful about Shabbos. So therefore, that caused the people there to, because they kept Shabbos, they were more careful about Shabbos. It says, whoever keeps Shabbos, a person who keeps Shabbos is careful about Shabbos, he's forgiven for all sins. So there's an element of accepting Shabbos early and taking more care about Shabbos, and causing you to have like more mitzvahs, and it could have this effect on you to be Maleim mitzvahs kerimain, filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, but also it also says that because it's situated in the center of Eretz Israel, so I guess the analogy is it's at the heart of Israel because it's at the center and its importance to everyone.
So that's a very interesting point that you're making, because one of the commentaries says something along those lines. Now, I'm not exactly sure what are you bringing out from the fact.
Oh, I'm just bringing out again. It says, and why was Rakas called Tiberias? It is because quote, it is situated in the center of Eretz Israel. so it says again in the footnote, is like a navel is situated in the center of one's body. So Tiberias is situated in the center of Eretz Yisrael. So just say the navel. It's like, well, the navel is where life began from the birthing. Okay, so it's the center of the Jewish people because of it being in the center of the land. That's the way I can interpret that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to add one point, and not it's not my own. It's there's a Rosh Kollel, the head of a yeshiva in Israel, who mentioned this interesting idea. He says, really, the entire Jewish people are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. But our Gemara just said, as Robert just mentioned, that Tiberia is the center of Israel, or it's the navel, the source of sustenance for the entire Israel. So when we talk about Tiberia, it actually has an impact on the whole Israel. So really, all of Israel is filled with mitzvahs with like a pomegranate, and we're just mentioning it with regard to Tiberia because Tiberia is like the source of it. But really, it has an impact on the entire Israel, and really, all of Israel is included in this. And we mention it when it comes to Tiberia because Tiberia is the navel of the entire Israel. Okay, that sort of like adds a little like answers the question. Yes, Isaac.
I had heard, well, in this context, definitely an interesting word, and that is that when, depending where, I'm not exactly sure where, but where it says that you are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate, it's not a compliment. Because a pomegranate, unlike any other fruit, has its seeds spread throughout the entire inside. There's no core, there's no essence. An apple, an orange even, certainly a plum, all have a core of where their center is, and that disparagingly, I mean, I know it's full, but to say that you're full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate basically means that they're spread through you, yeah, but that you don't have your core together. You know, you're doing mitzvahs by rote, by habit, whatever it is, but that there's no essence to it. So I don't know how that shot fits in with all the different things we're talking about, but I thought it was an interesting observation.
Well, it definitely is different than the common understanding of the Gemara. I'll tell you that. That's for sure not the simple interpretation of the Gemara. It also doesn't fit so smoothly because the Gemara says, even the empty ones, they're filled with their malay mitzvahs karimai.
Right.
Emphasizing that even though they're empty, but they really have something positive about them.
Yes.
So it
not
sounds
ideal.
like the Gemara. Of course, it's not ideal. No, that's a given. It's not ideal because why are we calling them reikonim? That would be a source. The fact that they're called empty ones is a source along your lines. You could say your pshat with that this is a compliment. It is a compliment, but why are we calling them empty? So that would be, in other words, Isaac's insight. I think if you tweak it a little, it might be a nice shot.
Yeah.
The question on the Gemara is, the question you have to ask is, if they're so filled with mitzvahs, why are we calling them empty ones? So on that, you could say Isaac's insight that, well, they're missing a core, so they're considered empty because they don't have the full, passion for mitzvahs. But even them, they're still filled with mitzvahs. They're still filled like a pomegranate. So even the empty ones, so that would maybe be a way to add. But it's still a compliment. It's not saying something negative about them. It's even the empty ones. Of course, many of them are not empty, but even the ones that are empty, even they are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So that's the way I think it would be a way to explain that. Good. Okay, I think Ben's hand was up for a long time.
I have two things. First, in Brachot, we learned about Tveria and Tzipori that people used to go and shop. You told us that
Right.
that people go from Tveria to Tzipori and from Tzipori to Tveria because of the time change for Shabbat when it ends. But as far as the rimon, as far as the pomegranate, to me, it makes more sense that you don't need a core because the seeds themselves, the mitzvot are the core and you are full of it.
Mm-hmm.
The core in an apple or a pear, you don't eat it, you throw it out.
The waste.
It's a waste.
Uh-huh.
But the seeds are the main thing. And that's why they took a rimon and not another fruit.
Okay. Good insight. Good thought. Yes, Robert.
I mean, we talk about in the preceding passages that the importance of it, because Rabbi Akiva is buried there, and it's known as at least 7 of the matriarchs of our people are buried there. So it's very significant because of the holy ones and pilgrimages that people make to Tiberias as well.
So Robert is explaining that maybe the reason why it's influential in causing even simple people to have a lot of mitzvahs is because there's very holy people buried there. That's a good insight that would be an influence, even though there are many holy graves throughout Israel. But this is the the thing is Hebron is where most of the matriarchs are, but and patriarchs, but
who are the
Robert is
7
mentioning
in
Rabbi
Tveria?
Akiva. Yeah, I'm not sure what it means, what he means by that, but I believe it does say that Bilhah and Zilpah are buried in Tveria.
Right. It says the mother's tombs, right? As also Yocheved, daughter of Elisheva and Levi, and Zipporah, Moses' wife.
So I think right near Rabbi Akiva's, I'm not sure if it's near Rabbi Akiva's grave there. I have to. I didn't go on this past trip. I 20 years ago I went and I saw Rabbi Akiva's grave, and I think near it was the Bilhah and Zilpah, and maybe Yocheved and Tzipporah. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember Bilhah and Zilpah. That there's some grave mark there. Of course, you always have to question how do we know that these are the graves from so many generations back. And you know the famous story of the tour guide who came to Shmuel Hanavi's grave. He says, "This is the grave of Shmuel Hanavi." And then he came somewhere else another day. He said, "This is the grave of Shmuel Hanavi." So they asked him, how did he have 2 graves? They said, "No, one's for Shmuel Aleph and the other is Shmuel Beis." Because you could think that there's the 2 books, there's 2 different people, but you could think, Anyway, the bottom line is that that's an interesting insight, especially because Rabbi Akiva, being the source of all of the oral Torah, in a certain sense, is from Rabbi Akiva. So all of his students are the authors of all, so that they could have influence. The only question is, when is this referring to? When did Tveria have the simple people there that they're filled with mitzvahs? At what time? In other words, it was obviously a prophecy about the future. It was in the time of Yoshua. It mentions this term rekes, and that, which we're saying even rekonim, even empty ones, are filled with mitzvahs, but it was named that way before the Jewish people had actually showed their mitzvahs yet. I mean, they're just conquering the land. So it's obviously a prophecy. It's a prophetic name of the future, but when is it referring to? So if you want to say it refers to a time later after the time of Rabbi Akiva, then you could say Robert's insight would apply, because it's referring to a time later. If it's referring to more, an earlier time, then you would need to maybe we could rely on the other reasons, the other graves that he's referring to being. Right. The only question is, how could that compete with Hebron? Hebron, you would think, should be more influential because there are many holy people buried in Hebron more than even in Tveria. at least at that time, in the early, early stages. All the patriarchs are buried in patriarchs and matriarchs are buried in Hebron. So,
but
that would be a little question.
But it doesn't mean they're in competition. They're really complementary to each other when people make pilgrimages. There's one that's known as where the patriarchs, and then primarily where the matriarchs are, because they say that women go to the place where the matriarchs are and pray for fertility.
Uh-huh. Right, but the thing is that most of the matriarchs are buried in Hebron also with the patriarchs. It's only the two that you mentioned, the other two wives of Jacob that you met that are buried. You get what I'm saying? Can you hear me? Yeah. So most of the matriarchs are buried with the patriarchs in Hebron, and it's only the two additional wives of Jacob that are buried in Tiberia, Bilhah and Zilpah.
I think
otherwise
they meant important women. That's what I would think. They meant 7 important women, matriarchs.
Anyway, okay. Well, then you would have to say even the empty ones.
Rachel is not buried there.
Right. True. Rachel is not. You're right. I'm sorry. Right. Rachel is not buried there. But there are three matriarchs that are. Sarah, Rivka, and Leah are buried in Hebron, and Chava, and so. But you know what? I think Robert's shot could work, because I'll tell you why. There is a way to learn this Gemara that it's referring to the Reikonim, even the empty ones, is referring to the women who don't have the mitzvah of learning Torah, or they're limited with how many with their even the women who don't have the same number of mitzvahs, the Reikonim, they're filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate, because they're encouraging their husbands to learn Torah. Now, what got the women and encouraged their husbands and their children to learn Torah? It's the women's burial in Tiberia, the women being buried in Tiberia, like Robert is saying. So maybe that could connect these two pshatim. They have the women that are buried in Tiberia influencing the women that they come there to pray for their children, and they it's inspirational for them to encourage their husbands and children to learn Torah, and that's why Tiberia would be a place where the women are filled with mitzvahs, because it's a place where they encourage their husbands and children to learn. Okay. Well, anyway, that's a nice insight. Thank you. What?
Tomb of the matriarchs in Tiberia, Keber HaImahos, which is the traditional burial place of Bilhah and Zilpah.
Yeah. Is that near Rabbi Akiva? Does it say that? Maybe not. I don't remember Rabbi so Akiva? Clearly. What?
You said you want to know where the tomb of Rabbi Akiva is?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Right. It is in Tiberias. That's what they say.
Right.
It's in Tiberias, but
I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's continue with the Gemara. I'm sorry. Ezra wanted to say something. Ezra?
No.
What?
No, the only thing I said was that Rachel was not buried there.
Rachel was not buried. Okay. Oh, so you said okay.
Right. Buried on the road.
On the road.
But
okay. We are going to continue. So we started the Gemara about Kitrain is Tzipori. And Kitrain is Tzipori, and the Gemara says that seems to be problematic, because Kitrain is in the portion of Zvulun, and that doesn't seem to work if you say Kitrain is Tzipori, because obviously Tzipori was not in Zvulun's portion. So the Gemara tries to prove it, and that's where we were up to. We were mentioning that Zvulun was complaining. Zvulun got a certain piece of land that they were not happy about, and it's based. Now we don't really know this because the verse says it clearly. We know it from a hint in the verse. The rabbis have a drasha, they darshan that's what the verse means. or that's a deeper layer of the verse. The verse literally just means that Zevulun risked their life to fight for the lands when that Naphtali was on an elevated field, al Meroime Sada. And because it mentions that, which seems to be not important to know, the Gemara says the interpretation has to be, means that Zvulun was saying, why do I have what I have and you're on a Meroime Sada, you're on an exalted field, you have a beautiful fields and we don't have those fields, and this is not fair. And so Hashem told Zvulun, don't worry, you're going to have a lot of wealth from other things because you're going to have the chilazon. Anyone know what the chilazon is?
It's a slug.
We don't know exactly, but it's some type of a creature, a fish, or similar to a fish that has the ink for the color techeles of the tzitzis. What?
Well, the feeling, the one they found now, is that it's a snail.
A snail, yeah, a slug.
A water creature.
But there's a big debate about, what it is and what if we even know what it is. And it's a very heated debate. The tchelas, I'm sure you could look it up online. There's much research was done in the late 1800s and beginning of the 1900s, trying to figure out if we could find the real techelas. There are a few hints in the Gemara and Medrash what the chilazon, where it comes from, but we weren't. No one seemed to want to agree. There was a big rabbi, great scholar, the Radzina, Rabbi Lehner, and he tried to. He did his research and tried to convince people that it was the cuttlefish.
Yeah, but he did a test on his tchelas recently, and it's not even a cuttlefish. His were the Razina Rebbe. His whatever married my aunt, so I learned a lot of stuff about him. The problem was they found that his stuff was totally vegetarian. It was from plants, and
because they mixed it. What they ended up doing was mixing this gland or this liquid from the fish, and of course you do have to mix it with certain things. So it ended up that the final result looks blue. But the thing is, what Isaac is saying is it ended up that the reason it looked blue was because of the additives that they had instead of the actual.
No, there's a whole story. It's amazing. It's like a nest. The problem was they found the stuff, but whenever they put it on tcheles, it turned purple. And they were going crazy. Argamon is purple, not tcheles. And people said, this can't be tcheles. So they were in Greece or whatever, on a rowboat or whatever, with a Greek fisherman, because they were exploring around there to find what else it could be. So he goes, purple. They had some of the stuff. He rubbed it on his arm and stood out in the sun, and it turned blue. So it has a reaction to natural sunlight that makes it turn blue. And then you put it on a cloth, and it's one of the toughest and most lasting dyes that there are for things. We lost it because the Romans outlawed it. It became such a royal pigment that you had to be part of the Roman leader, whatever it was. It was on pain of death. You could not wear tcheles. And that is why it was ultimately, not ultimately, it was now rediscovered, but forgotten as to where it was. But the idea that you can take it out of the snail, rub it on something, and it's purple. But it's only the action of being out in the sunlight before it fixes that makes it blue, a beautiful blue. And that's the story I read also.
So was that the reason why other rabbis didn't accept it, because that's not considered blue if you have to leave it in the sun? Or was that? I
don't get into the Rebbe fights. The chiefs, they do their own. The wizards have their own thing. They do what they do.
But I'm saying as to why it was for so long not understood to be tcheles is because when anybody used the dye from the Murex trunculus, the name of the snail, it would turn purple. And that bothered everybody for a long time. How could this be the tcheles? A Greek fisherman showed him how this could be the tcheles.
So that's now not the tchelas that is common now. I don't think is this same cuttlefish. I think
not cuttlefish.
Right.
Murex trunculus.
But that's not what the Radzina came up with.
No, the Radzina had something else. He said cuttlefish.
Right.
But ultimately, the one that he himself wore, they found that after he passed away, wasn't from a fish. It was from a plant.
That sounds very surprising. He was trying to convince the whole world.
He did. He wrote Sfarim on it.
No,
he was the big maven on it.
That's very interesting. So he married your aunt?
My aunt Chava, my uncle Harry's wife. She is a descendant from, I think, a granddaughter or whatever from the Radzina Rebbe.
Okay. Wow. All right. So anyway, let's go back into the Gemara. We are on page 6a, and we're going to start with 6a. We're going to start on the wide lines. Amar Zeira. Okay, the fourth wide line, 6a. If Robert, if you want to tell us where it is in the
it's all in the Steinsaltz.
I'm trying to find it.
It must be a quarter of the way down the page, so it's probably like 6A2 probably. Amar Zeira. Zeira said
6A2. The Gemara concludes the challenge of Zera's statement that Kitron and Sapori.
Okay.
So on the top right-hand side on 6A2.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amar Zeira. Zeira says, Zeira says, Kitrain Zusi Pari. Kitrain is, when it says in the Pasuk Kitrain, in the book of Shoftim, it is referring to Tzipari. Now, why is it called Why is it called Tzipari? Because it's on top of a mountain, just like a bird generally it situates itself on a high place. So the same thing as Tzipari is on the top of the mountain, and this brings us back to what we mentioned about the people keeping Shabbos in Tveria, that there were a lot of people, they would accept Shabbos in Tveria because that means they would accept Shabbos early, and they would end Shabbos in Tzipori because that's where they would see the sun set, and they would see it, they would still see the sun very much because they were so high up that it wouldn't set till much later because they were able to see this. They were continuously able to see the sun because they were so high up. They saw it when it was going down and further down, and they could continuously see it. So ultimately, they would extend their Shabbos in that area from Tveria to Tzipori. That was something unique about the people there, which is interesting because there's a discussion about when does Shabbos really begin if you live in a valley or if you live on a mountain. Does it go by, is there a set time, meaning whether you're on the valley or in the mountain, is it the same time? And let's say one person is on top of the mountain, the other person is below the mountain. Does his Shabbos start earlier if he's below the mountain? Because for him, the sun sort of set. On the other hand, no, if you're on top of the mountain, you would see that the sun hasn't set yet. So the understanding is, at least according to I know in Lubavitch at least there's something called Shkia Haniris, Shkia Hamitis, that the sun setting is it really applies. The official rule is that you go by going on top of a mountain in your area. That's when you'll really see when is the sun setting. And that seems like that would be the meaning of why it was such a special thing to go to Tveria, accept Shabbos, is because you're really accepting Shabbos early in Tveria. It's not like you need to accept Shabbos at that time, because if you went to the top of the mountain, you'd see that it's not really Shabbos yet. But yet they still would accept Shabbos when for them it was getting dark, because they went above and beyond the letter of the law, because it was really too early, because had they gone to a mountaintop, they would see that it's not really Shabbos yet. So that's the touches on the laws of Shabbos and when is the real Shkia, when is the real setting of the sun, and that's the Tzipori that we're referring to, and that's based on a Gemara. The story is a Gemara in Shabbos that we quoted. Okay, so anyway, the Gemara is asking here that could Kitron be Tzipori? The Gemara asks, for Kitron Tzipori, is Kitron really Tzipori? Zeira, you just said Kitron is Tzipori, and the reason it's called Tzipori is because it's on the top of a mountain. That's why it's called Tzipori. The Gemara says, is it really so? But Kitron is really in the portion of Zebulun, and Tzipori is not in Zebulun area. And how do D'chsiv, as it says, that Zebulun Kitron, Zebulun did not conquer the dwellers of Kitron, Nahalol, and the dwellers of Nahalol. That's the verse that in Zebulun, and the Gemara explains that well, first of all, you see right there that Kitron is part of Zebulun, because it mentions that it should have conquered that area, and it didn't. And instead, they let them dwell there. They gave them, they would charge them taxes for living there, but they didn't conquer them. Now, was Zvulun Misraim al Midais of Hava, and it says Zvulun complained about its mazel, about its midais, about its measure, that it was what it was meted out. In other words, what did it receive? It received the land that it wasn't happy about. Shenemar, as it says, Zvulun am cheref nafshay lamos. It says Zvulun was a nation that that they risked their life, or they gave their life to die in order to fight. They were ones that helped fight with Yehoshua. Matam, what is the reason why they were willing to risk their life to fight? Mishum, because the Naphtali al Mereme Sadeh. Naphtali was dwelling on a place of where it had fields. There were fields there, and it was jealous. And
high fields.
And it had high fields, thank you. And this was his complaint. So they risked their life in order to
they got mountains
they were
and hills.
They were like angry about their portion. So they disparaged their life. They were cheref nafshay lamos. So it says, Amar Zvulun l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zvulun said before Hashem, Rabbeinu Shalayla, Master of the Universe, La'achei nasatu lahem sadei suchramim. To my brothers, you gave them fields and vineyards. V'li nasatu haram ukvais. And to me, you give mountains and hills. La'achei nasatu lahem artzois. To my brother, you gave lands. V'li nasatu yamim monoharos. And me, you gave oceans and rivers. Amar Loi, Hashem answered him, Kulan tzrichen lach. All of them need you, al yadei chilazain, through the chilazain, through this, which we were talking about, this creature that gives off the dye for the tchelas. Everyone is going to need you because they need this dye. Now, of course, there's the discussion of where exactly, why don't we have it now? And that's what Isaac was talking about, that there was a rabbi who tried to find it. And it's unclear. There's contradictory statements. There's a Gemara that mentions that it's similar to a fish. So does that mean it is a fish? Does it live in the water? Here, it's Rashi says something interesting. He says that it comes from the water to the mountains. So it sounds like maybe it's not a fish, just that it's similar to a fish, at least according to Rashi. Anyway, the bottom line is that it's a creature that we get the tchelas for the tzitzis. Now, I should clarify that just because we use that tchelas for the tzitzis, the other items that need tchelas were not necessarily from this same tchelas. Just tzitzis has a unique tchelas to it. it doesn't mean necessarily that the items for the Mishkan and so on needed the same tchelas. The tchelas for tzitzis was a special tchelas from the chilazon animal creature, and either it's a fish or a snail or a slug or however, whatever. When Mashiach comes, we'll find out what it really is. But and it became missing sometime after the end of the Gemara, because there are stories in the Gemara that seem to mention it. And it seems like right after the Gemara, or at the end of the time of the Gemara, Rav Ashi's time, when the Gemara was being compiled, somewhere around that time is when we stopped being able to get it. So Hashem is trying to appease Zvulun, or calm them down, by telling them that, don't worry, everyone's going to need you for the tchelas, and the tchelas, the chilazon is somewhere in your area is where they have this chilazon. In other words, it's specifically in Zvulun's area. So why did the Radzina travel to Italy or to find this creature? So because over there they have museums, scenes of different creatures, of animals from around the world. So he went there to try to find, but really it's in the place of Zvulun. That's where to find it. Shenever, as it says, Amim Har Yikro, nations will come to the mountain. I added a few words over there because the pasuk is a little longer than it brings. It says that in your area is the Sfune Tmunei Chol, the treasure hidden in sand. Now, what does this refer to? Tani, we learned, Tani Rabbi Yosef learned in a Braisa, Sfune is Zechi Lazim. Sfune, Yosef brought this Braisa that where it says, Sfune Zechi Lazim. Sfune is chilazon, that it means something, a treasure is referring to the chilazon. Tmune zutris. Tmune is a type of fish, seems like a tunina, maybe like a tuna. And choil zuz chuchas levana. Choil is white glass, which maybe means crystal. I don't know. It's a very special type of sand in that area where you could make from the sand this special type of glass called white glass. I'm guessing that it might be crystal. Somehow their glass was much better than all other glasses. It's fit for this special type of zechuches levana. I'm not sure if that was the Gemara. We did have a Gemara in Brachas where someone smashed the glass at the wedding. I think it might have been zechuches levana. Might have been a white glass. He thought that people were acting overly frivolous at this wedding, and he said, "Let me break something to minimize. People shouldn't overindulge in things that
He broke some bowl, I think.
Was it Zechuches Levana? I think it might have been Zechuches Levana.
Maybe.
Yeah, I have to take a look. Anyway, so this is, where do you get Zechuches Levana from? Where do you have this special type of sand that could make this special glass? It's in the proportion of Zavulun. So Zavulun had Chilazon. It had this tris, which seems to be a big fish. I don't know. Maybe I guess we could figure it out. Are there any big fish in the Mediterranean? Is that a famous place for tuna? I don't know, but if that's it could be, maybe it's referring to tuna, large fish. In the and anyways, chuches levana is this type of glass. Okay, Amar Lefanov, he said before Hashem, Zvulun said, Rebbeinu Shalom, mi moidieni, who is going to let me know that they're not stealing these items from my area, from me?
Yeah.
In other words, I can't protect it. So Amar Loi, Hashem said, don't worry, Sham Yizbechu Zivchei Tzedek, there they will bring sacrifices of righteousness, of justice. What does that mean? That just like sacrifices can't be brought from anything stolen, you don't have to worry. Let me read it inside. Siman zeh yehelecha. This will be a sign for you. Kol hanoitel memcha v'loy damim. Whoever takes from you without paying, einoi moyel b'parkamatya shalei klum, will not benefit in their business anything, because it's somehow not going to work for them. It's not going to, it won't last. It won't work. It won't. The isal kadaitoch. Now, the Gemara now goes back to what we're brought this whole Gemara for. Why did we bring this whole Gemara? If you want to tell me that Kitrein is Tzipayri, and we now know that Tzipayri is this place of Zevulun's area. Amai Misraim al Midaisav. Why would Zevulun been complaining about his area? Tzipayri is a place that is a great land. Why would he have been complaining for Tzipayri? It must be that Kitrein is not Tzipayri. In other words, Kitrein was in the place of Zevulun. I think I made a mistake before when I said Tzipayri. Kitrein is in Zevulun's area. Now, and we don't know where Kitrein is. The Gemara said before Kitrein is Tzipayri. Gemara is asking if Kitrein is Tzipayri, then it seems surprising that Zvulun would have been complaining. This is a great land, Tzipayri. It's much better than with fields and vineyards. It's a wonderful land. So v'chitema. So maybe you'll say, yeah, very nice. It's a wonderful land, but maybe it's missing certain things. Maybe v'chitema. Maybe you'll say the lesbos zavas cholav dvash. Maybe it doesn't have. It's not flowing with milk and honey. Maybe you'll say that. Via Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, "L'di chazili zavas cholav dvash t'tzipayri." I saw the Zavas Cholav Dvash of Tzipayri B'Havya Shisha Asa Mil al Shisha Asa Mil. And the Zavas Cholav Dvash, the flowing of milk and honey of Tzipayri, is a huge amount. It's a nice size area. So if you want to tell me that they were complaining because they might have the land that's blessed, but it's missing the beauty of Israel that that it's supposed to be flowing with milk and honey, and if so, maybe it's missing that. And now it's interesting. Rashi over here says that the Zavas Cholav Udvash, what does it mean? It's flowing with milk and honey. So Rashi says the goats eat the figs, and the honey would spill out from them, and the milk would come out from the goats, and it would be like a stream, which implies, normally you think, okay, so the trees are there's a stream of honey coming from the tree, from the figs, and there's a stream of milk coming from the goats. Rashi says no, it's the same. It's together. The goats would eat these te'anim, and it would cause the honey from it to flow out. Well, I guess while they're biting it, the other side would spritz maybe from the other side of the,
or into the milk.
Into the milk,
right?
And it would spill out into the milk, and but from it doesn't mean internally into the milk. It means externally, or it doesn't mean internally. In other words, did it eat it? And in the body,
you can get from a goat. You can get goat milk.
Did the body, when it gave milk, did it have fig juice, fig honey in the milk, or did it spill into?
It ate the figs, and it became part of its milk.
Part of the milk. So it became a portion. That's the way you understand Rashi. Became a portion of the milk.
When you milk the goat, it spritzes You know, it's a spritz out.
So maybe that's okay. I mean, it becomes part of their milk. Let me just see if that's the way they
And
translate that.
Goat milk was not such an unusual item back then. It was easier to keep goats than it was to keep cows, because goats moved with you. They were like, they had flocks, and they were going and they were moving. You ever go up in New York, up on the highway up to the Catskills, and look at the cows? They stand there.
The goats move around more than cows? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, they're constantly moving. Flocks, that's what they were. They were shepherds.
Right.
They didn't keep cows. They had sheep and they had goats. And that's why all the korbanos came from sheeps and goats, because that was hakeves ha'echad. You always had a keves around.
Sheep like flat land and goats like mountainous land.
Yeah. Anyway, it might be as Isaac is saying it. It might be that it just means that the honey came out from the figs and the milk came out from the goats, and together it was
mixed together. I understand.
Somehow mixed together. But definitely a way to read it, like Rashi says. Like Isaac is explaining Rashi. Rashi is a little vague because he says that they would eat them, and then he first says that the davash would spill out from them,
right,
and the milk would come from the goats. He like separates it, so that's why I was thinking maybe it doesn't mean that internally in the stomach of the goat. But I don't know. Does the art scroll say if it's referring to that in the stomach of the goat it gives milk that has honey in it? It doesn't say. All right. Okay.
We have to be careful with the word honey, because we keep thinking like bees honey. It's not. It's the oil from the
figs. Yeah, but it probably doesn't look that much. It probably has a similar look.
I'm sure it does, but it's not very heavy.
It's not bee honey. It's not bee honey.
Not bee honey.
Okay, so the bottom line is that there's a very large amount of land that Sipori had that was flowing with milk and honey. And the Gemara says that if Zevulun got Sipori, then, and we're going to translate Kitrain to mean Sipori, means that's what Zevulun had, that had this land of Sipori, then it seems surprising that they were complaining. It's a very good land, and it's flowing with milk and honey, 16 mil by 16 mil. Now, if you calculate that, a mil is like 3/4 of a mile. So 16 3/4 of miles by 16 3/4. That's a very large area relative to the other portions. This is maybe about let's say 12 miles by 12 miles of flowing with milk and honey. Now, if you want to say that maybe other people's area had more flowing with milk and honey than theirs, maybe you'll say, well, they had 12 miles by 12 miles of flowing of milk and honey. Maybe the other tribes had more. I saw the flowing of milk and honey of all the land of Israel. It was this area from Beit Kuvi, which is one place, all the way till Akra de Solbachni, a second place. And Esrim Atartin Parsi Orca, it had 22 parsa. Parsa is 4 mil. That means 66 mil was the length. Upusya Shisa Parsi, and the width was 6 parsi, which would mean 24 parsa. So if you calculate it all together, it comes out that Sipori had a above the average amount of Zavas Cholav Udvash. It had above the percentage that it should have had relative to its portion. In Israel, it actually had more.
It had more than its fair share of 1/12.
It had more than its fair share.
1/10.
Afilu hachi, 1 over 9.5. It should have had one in 9.5 because there were 9.5 tribes in Israel and 2.5 outside of the land of Israel. So the amount that it had was more like 1/8, and it really should only have like 1/9 and 1 over 9.5. So it's got a more than it deserved. So why is it complaining? Why is Zevulun, the tribe of Zevulun, complaining? You know why it's complaining? Because the fact is, it did want to have, even though it had great land, and the land was very healthy, the air, I shouldn't say great land, it had a great piece of land because of the air was it was flowing with milk and honey. But the fact is, it wanted to have fields and vineyards, and it was complaining that it didn't have that. Dekanami, and the Gemara says it's hinted to Dechsiv because it says Naphtali v'Naphtali al Merayme Sada. Naphtali was on the land, the exalted land. And why did in Shemami Na that we hear from this that's what its complaint was, that it didn't it felt that it got gypped. It did have something good, but it still felt that it got gypped until Hashem comforted it by saying, you have the chilazain, you have the tunina, the tris, which is the big fish, and you have the choil zechuches levana, you have this white glass. So Hashem, the Gemara says Hashem comforted it with the chilazain, but then the Gemara mentions that the pasuk mentions that it had the chilazain together with these other two things. So the chilazon was its main comforting, that it's ayudei chilazon.
Which sea is in Naphtali? What body of water touches Naphtali then? That he says you got the chilazon. You have to have water to have it.
No, Zvulun.
Zvulun. I'm sorry, Zvulun.
So it would seem that it's referring to the Mediterranean. Even though there is a Rashi that uses the word Yam HaMelach, but it can't mean Yam HaMelach. It must mean the Mediterranean.
There's no fish in Yam HaMelach.
That supposedly they found tiny little. There might be some tiny thing that.
But Steinsaltz says that the fish is a type of a sardine.
Okay. So let's just summarize what we've learned here. So the Gemara initially wanted to say that Kitrain is Tzipori, and the Gemara said, is Kitrain Tzipori, but Kitrain is in the portion of Zevulun. And Zevulun is the one who complained about his land. So how could you say that's the land of Tzipori? So the problem with saying that it's Tzipori is the fact that Zevulun complained. If Zevulun didn't complain, it wouldn't be surprising. Yeah, it's fine. It's near Tveria. Zevulun had his land right there, no problem. But you're telling me that it's Tzipori is this city Kitrain that Zevulun had is Tzipori. That's surprising. Then that Zevulun is the one who complained, and we brought the whole story here how Zevulun complained about about their land, because why would they complain if they got Tzipori, such a great area? And the conclusion of the Gemara was that, it's very nice. It has a lot of good things, but they complained because they didn't have the Sodei Suchramim, they didn't have the fields and the vineyards, and that's what they would have liked, and that's what they saw Naphtali had, and they didn't have that. And Hashem appeased them by telling them that they shouldn't worry, what they have is not so bad, because it's actually very good. They have the Chilazon. And the Chilazon is something that everyone is going to need them for, and that is that's basically how they were pacified. So the Gemara mentioned a few interesting things that have mentioned that the land of Tzipori is Zavas Cholavud Vash, and it has a larger amount of Zavas Cholavud Vash. It mentioned that Zevulun has other big benefits to it as well, and so Zevulun was I guess in the end agreed. Now, it is surprising nowadays. You would say, what do you mean complaining? If you got they had the waterfront, so they were complaining that they had the naharais. Nowadays, that would be a good thing. You have naharais and yamim. If you have naharais and yamim, that would be nice to have waterfront estates. But it seems that their complaint was they wanted property to be able to support themselves, and they also were supporting Yitzchok. They were the ones who supported Yitzchok, and so they wanted more land. Okay, so now the next Gemara is Amar Rabavo. Rabavo says Ekroin te'akir. Ekroin will be uprooted. What is Ekroin? Zu Kesari Bas Edom. This is the city that Kesari, that the Edom people, the Romans lived there, and initially this is an area where it was owned by the Plishtim, but then the Romans conquered it, and the Romans lived there. It is surrounded with sand on all sides, and it was a peg that was prickling to the Yidden. It was stuck into the Jewish people in the days of the Greeks. Now, in other words, they caused us a lot of trouble. They were constantly causing trouble to the Jewish people.
Still do.
That city is going to be destroyed. Ekron Te'oker, and Uchshagover Malchus Beis Chashmonaim, when the Chashmonaim conquered when they became stronger, V'nitzchom, and they conquered it. Hayukayran Isa, they changed the name to Achidas, conquering of Migdal Shir, this Migdal, the tower of where the ministers, Migdal Shir, like Sarim, where the ministers dwelled. So we conquered this city where the ministers dwelled. That was the Chashmonaim during the story of Purim. They conquered that land. And now the Gemara continues and says, what does it mean? Another pasuk, I will remove dam of his blood from his mouth, v'shikutzav v'beit shinav, and his disgusting things from his teeth, from between his teeth, v'nishar gamhu lelakenu, and he will remain to our God. So what does this mean? V'asiraisi dam of mipiv, I will remove dam of his blood from his mouth, is zebes bamaya. This is the avodah zarah. This is the avodah zarah of the Romans. It's base bamaya, one of their idols. It's going to be removed. Vishikutzav, it's his disgusting thing from between his teeth. Zebes galaya. This is another one of their avodah zarahs. And shalahen of them, base galaya shalahen. V'nishar gamhu. So Hashem is going to take. He's going to take their names, and which were, and they're not going to be called by their names of honor anymore. Rather, they'll be called by disparaging names. V'nishar gamhu lelakenu elu bate knesiyos bate midrash sheba edom. They will remain for Hashem. This is referring to the shuls, I shouldn't say shuls, these houses of worship and houses of study of Edom that no, actually the next one is what we can't say. This one is actually referring to shuls in Edom. V'haya ka'aluf v'Yehuda v'Ekron ki Yevusi. And these cities of Edom will be like Aluf in Yehuda, and Ekron will be like Yerushalayim. Yevusi was referring to Yerushalayim, that where the Yevusim used to live, and that refers to Elu Tratius V'Kerkasiyos Sheba Edom. This is referring to the theaters in the circuses of Edom, she'asidim sari Yehuda l'lamed ben Torah l'rabim, that there we will be studying Torah in public in these circuses and theaters. So again, we interpreted this verse that it's referring, that the verse mentions Hashem is going to remove these disgusting things and something's going to remain. And that refers to the things that the disgusting things are the Avodah Zarah, the idol. And the thing that will remain is the actual shuls that were there, that the Yidden built there. And then it mentions that the cities will be like Yehuda in Yevusi, that these cities in Edom, in Rome, will be like Jewish cities. It refers to the circuses and the theaters that are going to be changed over to be used to study Torah. Now, there's a big discussion in halacha, and Tosfos brings it down over here, that are you allowed to change a place that was used for idol worship for Avodah Zarah? So when he mentions the theaters and the circuses, Tosfos over here says that some say that it's referring to the houses of idol worship, and we're calling them theaters and circuses in a way of a disparaging way to refer to them. But really, it's referring to idol. Now, if they're really places of idol worship, are you allowed to switch it over and use it for a shul, or is it disgusting? So this is so Tosfos says, how could you say such a thing? Because these places are disgusting. How could you learn Torah there? It must be that these places were not actual churches or houses of worship of idols. Rather, the people who would worship idols, they used to hang out there, but not that it was actually used as a place of idol worship. But there's a big discussion in halacha, because we do find that there's a lot of shuls that used to be churches. And are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to use a shul for a church? And it's brought in chapter 154 in Shulchan Aruch about all the laws of changing over a church for a shul. It talks in the Shulchan Aruch itself. It talks about using a candle that it was burning in the. Are you allowed to use the candle that was burning in the church, and was put out by their shamash? Can you now go and bring it to a shul? And it says you can't. So the question is, so how is making a church into a shul, is that any different? And there is a whole discussion. There seems to be a machlokes, an argument, but the question is, to what extent is the argument? Where does it, and are there ways around it? Can you, like, if you rebuild, if you change around some of the structure of it, is that good enough? Do you have to rebuild the whole thing? Is it enough just to take out the idols, or and why would the candle be different than the actual building of a shul? Why would there be a difference? You can't use the candle for a shul, and would this be applied to your house? Are you allowed to buy a church and use it for your house? That would seem to be okay. The issue is really to use it for a shul. It's more disgusting to have such a place being used as a shul. And like it's a little disgraceful to Hashem to use such a place for a shul. At least that's one way of looking at it. Anyway, so it's interesting. I have a brother-in-law who actually bought a church and used it for a shul. But
don't tell the young Israel. I forget. No, now they have their own building. But they used to have in Rockland County, my brother-in-law, Kew Gardens, not Kew Gardens, New Rochelle. The Israel of New Rochelle used to be an old church, and it was beautiful to go in there. They obviously took out the images and changed the stained glass, but to watch the old wood and the care that they gave to building it, and they put the right, images in it was beautiful. Beautiful. Anyway, bottom line is, it's a big discussion in halacha, and it's been talked about. There's a Moshe Feinstein has a discussion about it, and Tzitz Eliezer. There's a lot of discussion about this topic, and this is based on this Tosfos over here and this Gemara, that we're going to switch over the theaters and circuses to become of Rome to become place to learn Torah in public. Okay, sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sei gesund.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have
Moshe.
a great day.
Thank you.
Lots
Moshe,
of-
how are you feeling, Moshe?
Thank God, a little better, Rabbi. A little bit better.
Good.
Thank
Baruch
God.
Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, take care.